So again, good afternoon. Good afternoon. This class is a bit special because we have guests who are joining us specifically on this topic as well. Same all people, all faces here are our Bill students, and we do have external students who join us only on this course, and also external audiences who join us particularly in this particular class. Okay, so welcome. This is the first class in this lecture series on the AI and the law. Okay, and the topic of today is challenges and opportunities of AI. No worries. It's the challenges and opportunities of AI. And as just a little bit of background, in the previous 3 classes, we've learned, well, the big picture. And one of the main messages that we sort of discussed was the relationship between AI and law is bidirectional, right? It is not just working one way, that you are a lawyer and you want to regulate AI, but you also work on the other way around as well, where AI and the technology related to it are used in order to enhance the capability, enhance the services, and enhance the deliverables that the legal industry has been promising to deliver. All right, so it is bidirectional in that sense. And we spent our last 6 hours learned pretty much in depth, I think, about artificial intelligence and machine learning from Dr. Ekapon. So I think now we sort of know the technology to a certain extent, and we don't treat it as a black box anymore, hopefully. So in this next step, it is truly my honor, truly my privilege as well, to be able to have an opportunity to invite our 3 panelists today. They are top experts, not at the national level, but international level in their own respective fields. Without further ado, I introduce them briefly, and then I will let them to sort of tell you a bit more about experience and background. For the first one of the most important industry that is related to us all as lawyers is the legal industry. And it is one of the few that people discuss a lot, the potential of using AI. And it's my honor to have Mr. Andrew Stoutley, who is the COO of one of the top, if not the top law firm here in Thailand, and also in this region of Southeast Asia, Tilleke and Gibbins. So please give a big round of applause to Andrew Stoutley, who's joining us today. And the second one is Dr. Sutapa Amornvivat, who is the CEO of ABACUS Digital, one of the fastest growing fintech company in Thailand ever. And she is, well, if you look at her profile and experience, you can be amazed, as I am, and I has always been. So thank you very much. And I think the financial industry is one of the industries that is really interesting in so many fronts, because the application is ubiquitous, but at the same time, the concerns are also there. So please give a big round of applause for Dr. Sutapa Amornvivat. And the last but not least, joining us from the UK is Assistant Professor Dr. Waty Lilaonitkul. She is now an assistant professor at the University College of London, UK. Dr. Waty has had experience in so many different industries. But recently, she has been working in the field of healthcare and medicine, especially the application of AI in these fields. So thanks for being here with us. It's truly our honor to have you, Dr. Waty. So please give a big round of applause, please. All right. So just would like to get to know you guys a little bit, and that is going to be related to what we're going to talk about as well, because I really want to learn from all of you, like from the field, about this kind of like AI and the law, and AI actually itself and the development and evolution of it in reality. So may I start with you, Andrew?
Sure. You want to start with introduction to me? Or?
Yeah, introduction first, and then we go into detail.
So background on me. I am the COO at Tilleke and Gibbins. That means I am generally responsible for working with our firm's managing partners to oversee our firm's business. And I'm not a lawyer by background. I'm also the only non-PhD, I think, on this panel, although I did 1 year of a PhD at one point. So I have more of a business background. I have been with Tilleke for nearly 18 years, which is how long I've been here in Thailand, and came up through the firm in our marketing and business development group. And at some point, my remit expanded to oversee other firm business operations. So I directly oversee marketing and business development, human resources, technology, risk management and compliance, translation, and several other kind of internal functions that operate alongside the lawyers who are practicing law. And our firm is regional. We have about 140 lawyers here in Bangkok, making us certainly one of the biggest firms in Thailand. And then we have another 100 plus lawyers across Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Indonesia. So in my role, I work a lot on the regional integration and providing regional client service, and work closely with our managing partners on, firm strategy and generally our overall outlook. And so within that role, I certainly focus a lot on AI. It sounds like you've all had a really good start on your course. Certainly, it's still more of a black box to me, probably, than it is to you at this stage. But I can tell you that, as Ajahn Yok said, the legal industry is, really at the forefront of change in terms of the potential impact of AI. And I think there's a very famous Goldman Sachs study that said that 44% of legal tasks can be replaced but through AI-based automation. And certainly that raises a lot of concern, and a lot of people view that AI will be fundamentally transformative for the legal industry. I think my own personal view, I think if we're thinking about how AI is going to impact the legal industry, we need to be clear about what perspective I'm bringing versus others. So if we think of the legal industry, there are many distinct elements of it, right? And I work in a private practice law firm, and I work in a big firm. There's many big law type private practice firms where our core client base is multinational companies doing complex business transactions, corporate litigation, intellectual property. And then of course there's smaller private practice practitioners, individuals doing more what we call people law type work, whether it's divorces, small property transactions, working for small business. So you have private practice lawyers on one side. You have lawyers working in large companies, in-house legal teams, in-house legal departments, and how they think about AI and the impact of AI may be different than someone working in private practice, although the two come together in interesting ways because those are our clients and we have shared interests, but we also have commercial interests among each other, so that's an important factor. So most of the perspective I bring to today's discussion is on private practice and to some extent what we're hearing from our clients and how we're talking to clients about AI. But I want to also say, of course, there are other elements of the legal industry, the judiciary, regulators, civil society organizations like the Thailand Institute of Justice, bar associations, Thailand Lawyers Council. So there's many elements of the overall legal industry. And I feel like I should call out that my perspective and what I'm saying is definitely in the kind of big corporate law world. So I feel like maybe I should take a break there, but happy to delve into where we see the legal industry being impacted by AI as you wish.
Wow, that sounds exciting. really exciting. So please, Dr. Sutapa.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Yok for inviting me to be part of this panel. Very looking forward to hearing the insights and a lot of the discussion, not just from my, prestige from the, world-renowned panelists, both of you, and also from the panel as well. So my name is Sutapa. I'm a founding CEO of a company, a tech startup. It's a data tech startup called ABACUS Digital. And as Kun Yok mentioned, it's a fintech company that's actually focusing on providing financial inclusion. We are looking at the underserved market and realizing that a lot of the services that seems to be highly penetrated among the banked population is not being offered properly to the underserved group or the marginalized group. And for that matter, the technology that has become available today, not just AI though, has open access to those to a lot more services, more innovation on the services to provide financial inclusion. So before opening up this company called ABACUS Digital, my background was mathematician. I was just trained. I was trained as mathematicians and focusing on economics, on the welfare function, and then working for a consultant for a couple of years, realizing that we need depth into analyzing the economy and economic policy. So I pursue my PhD focusing on development economics and technology policy. And therefore, as you can see, that has sort of built the foundation to eventually become a tech entrepreneur that I know nothing about. AI was not really taught when I was there at MIT at the time. So after that, I worked for International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. Got a very good exposure at overseeing the microfinance for South Asian countries. And as you probably have heard of Brock and Grameen, those are the poster boys and poster girls of early microfinance development and the success stories and the failure stories. And from that matter, there was no technology involved. And even without technology, you can feel that innovation can really extend service to the underbanked, where the incumbents have no interest or no focus to offer. And now, when I moved to banking, I set up a risk modeling team for a bank from the Netherlands, and also once that bank moved to Bangkok, I set up this tech modeling unit within two banks. One of the banks is currently the bank that I used to work for. Right now is Siam Commercial Bank, and for that matter, when you use the human underwriter in the back end, you have immense benefit, but also limitations on having human in the back end. It could be cost, it could be fatigue, it could be inconsistency in so many levels. And therefore, after that, I became the chief economist of Siam Commercial Bank, overseeing quite a number of experiments that try to offer the financial services to the more of the underbanked group. Then I realized that the focus and the technical knowledge that requires to build a new product needs to be set up a new company. So that's why I came to ABACUS Digital that it is today. So basically, we are a company that built our own technology with the focus on providing these services to financial services to the underbanked. Okay. So shall I move into the fintech, because I realize that I use a lot of time on the background.
Maybe we come to that a bit later.
Okay, of course.
Dr. Waty.
Okay.
And Dr.
Hi,
Waty, please allow me to know a little bit more about what you've been experiencing.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this panel, and thank you, Ajahn Yok, for inviting me as well. Very big privilege for me to be here. The work that I do today at the university is basically working with clinicians from different fields and also other professionals within the healthcare industry, including pharmacologists and pharmacists. The role that I have is basically to work with the problem holder, which is the clinician research scientist, to define a problem and then to design the AI backend to solve their solution. From my perspective as a technologist, I am pretty much disease agnostic. I rely heavily on the problem holders, so the specialists within the field, to keep the AI working as it is expected to work and for it to be safe for use. So by way of background, I actually started as an electrical engineer and moved on very quickly into various industries outside of engineering. So I went on to work on big data and modeling in the financial industry at Goldman Sachs on the trading floor first, then moved on to work on multiple international agency type problems, including projects by UNDP, ILO, and eventually I found out very quickly as well that big data requires a different kind of technology in order to assimilate it and get as much as information as insight as possible. And because I am a technologist, the need was to position myself so I have the widest access to different specialties inside and outside of medicine, although currently our focus is on medical applications. And thus, in 2018, I re-entered into academia at UCL and started working with my collaborators as of today. The focus of all of the projects that we have are translational from the onset. So every project that we take up has to have a pathway towards getting to end users. That is either the doctors themselves as some kind of a support tool or directly in terms of patient support. It goes into various parts of the patient trajectory, all the way from hospital management, patient triaging, prediction of different kinds of severity of the disease, the presence and absence of disease, and even certain treatment recommendations. Now, in this field, we have a lot of problems as well as opportunities, which I'm sure we will discuss during this panel. The one thing that is really exciting is I think that AI is really here to stay. Personally, I don't think that AI is like Star Wars AI at this point. We're pretty Mickey Mouse where we stand, although it is still very, very useful. And definitely, I don't think it will be able to replace people in their tasks in the near future, but definitely it will replace a lot of tasks. So what that means for me is going forward into the future, what we're going to see is reorganization of the definition of markets, the definition of job roles within the markets, and the definition of how consumers are going to interact within those markets. And I think I'm going to end there.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, I think, I'm so excited to learn from all of you. We're going to talk about at least 4 to 5 things, okay? And of course, along the way, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I think that's going to just enrich the conversation that we're going to have. So stop at any point in time that you find, yeah, this is very interesting, I want to ask, go ahead, okay? I want to talk roughly about the future of AI in respective industries, and then let's get a bit deeper into these sort of concerns, if there could be any concerns, especially and the challenges. And then we want to learn from them, because if you look at them, I mean, they're not just working alone. Within these companies, there are so many people from different fields, and they work together to pretty much achieve certain common objectives. And that is going to be very interesting, because as I told you, you guys lawyers, one day in a very near future, that's the way you work as well. And then we move on to very interesting, how would you balance this kind of innovation and, well, regulation or responsibility, right? To which extent? Because these fields are very at the heart of the debate around the world, right? Medicine, finance, legal industries, when the application of AI will come. And then eventually we will touch upon the idea of like, okay, if you will become future, I don't want to use just lawyers, but future, well, valuable human resources within this ecosystem, what kind of things that you should really equip yourself now. Okay, so let's start with the first one. Tell us more, please, about your industry and your business, what's going on, and how AI has been affecting you. Who would like to begin first? Okay, Dr. Sutapa first, please.
In so many ways, AI has been, well, forget AI, I think technology has always been the core that build new business offering to the population, to the market, to the audience. But I would say that in banking industry in particular, we already seen much transformation from the in the past few years in terms of digitization, fraud detection, better lending lending assessment, but mostly focusing on automation of process. These can be a combination of many tools. One of them is AI, but not all questions have to be answered by artificial intelligence, as you can tell. And therefore, from our perspective, it's not so much about what AI can do or what AI can be a threat, but it's more about what has been the demand from the financial service perspective that has not been met, and what can be offered them. Can technology make it cheaper, more efficient, more accessible, less prejudiced? And if the technology is not the answer, then we can be a hybrid offering. So it's not so much about what AI can do or what AI can replace or what needs to be done in response to AI. It's what needs to be done in response to customer demand. And therefore, when it comes to AI, we can see a lot of technology companies that come to play into this financial service industry. A lot of them came from a non-bank entities. And therefore, I think the big questions that we need to ask is, when the regulation was designed to control or protect or govern the banking players, what happened to the non-banks who are offering the same service? Are they being regulated on the same level playing field? Are they less or more? I think it's up to the population or the consumers to decide at large. On the AI on what kind of application that AI can be used in near future, I would think that generative AI and LLM, the large language model, will become much more interesting to watch how it can compete with the human base who is on a client-facing services. For example, now when you get customer service, at least from my perspective on the product that I offer, we offer a product called Money Thunder. 93% of all inquiries are handled by machines in the back end. And in that sense, we can handle 200, 300,000 applications per month with only 6 customer service agents. Is it considered a replacement of a customer service agents? Not exactly, but I think it's helped the customer service agent to really handle the difficult cases, right? So in some way, it's augmented the work. We found that the generative AI has helped with coding, making sure it cuts down the coding capacity to about half within 1 month of launching of ChatGPT, right? And in that sense, because particularly the code review, it has been extremely helpful to use, to use the machines to actually looking through the gap and see whether the iterations has any loopholes, whether it's consistent across the style that we're looking for. And therefore, these are the areas where it's not directly towards financing, but it's more related to the process behind the scene and how we can offer those. Of course, there are some areas to be of concern, right? Especially in lending. If we use the black box model for lending, how is a company or the model would be accountable for bias that actually hidden in the model? What kind of transparency can we explain why one customer is rejected and another customer is accepted? I think these are something that as a service provider, we have to make sure that we walk a delicate balance of transparency and accuracy and the full benefit of full potential of what AI and black box models can offer. Another area of concern is obviously data privacy. It's not just unique to finance or any, healthcare. It's probably even more. It's data privacy and security. Who can access those data? How much should it be anonymized to allow researchers and policymakers to access those information with proper consent, but without compromising the privacy or the willpower of the real owner of those data. So these are some of the areas that for a developer of AI or the user of AI technologies need to be kept awake at night.
I think that's so interesting. I think you touched on a very interesting thing, and I just would like to point it out. You talk about this level playing field by the regulated body, because we have this kind of problem, not just in the technological area, right, but in other areas where you have this sort of vertical and horizontal regulators who don't even know the clear jurisdiction of the authorities. And you talk about non-bank who jump into the business without any kind of regulation. Right, and that basically means that when you're going to regulate, it's not just about regulate what, but it's also about the burden you impose on the business as well, where it's going to be this kind of it's not just at this level, it's going to be probably banks and non-banks who people like good boys and good girls are probably going to get punished. And that sort of happened a lot in so many industries. But also at the national level as well, right? You talk about international, where some countries just have this sort of light touched, but some countries very heavy touched. And how would you sort of balance there? Which is very interesting and something that we come back and talk about. And you also mentioned about some kind of, especially client-facing and things that probably you need to concern about the accountability and bias as well. Which I think this sort of lead me to, first of all, probably we can talk about the first and the second point together. Because we talk about the future a bit, the challenge, and the second one that I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about is kind of like deeper challenge that we have. So probably we come back to Dr. Sutapa later on that. But Kunandru, you are also client-facing business as well, and how does it help you, the AI? And another point that I would like to stress again is just the two. You have to answer first what your objective is, which is very interesting. And I think you're going to elaborate that on from the legal perspective, please.
I'll be glad to try. I think that the legal industry, as compared to finance, or as compared to healthcare, or as compared to just about every other industry in the world, is super slow. It is very conservative. And lawyers have a reputation, I would say maybe an unfair reputation, as being not very technological or forward-thinking. And actually, that's not my experience. I think a lot of our lawyers are very techie and are innovative and are ready to embrace change. But there is a broader issue that the profession itself is relatively conservative. And there are good studies internationally. In the US, there's a very famous thinker named Dr. Larry Richard who does studies on lawyer personalities and how the personalities of people who become lawyers differ from the general population. And the number one most outstanding difference between lawyers and the general population is high level of skepticism. People who become lawyers are skeptical and questioning, and of course, this makes perfect sense. It is the thing that makes them great lawyers, right? But it also, I think, lends itself to being a pretty conservative profession. And one issue for lawyers, which of course is very similar in healthcare and in banking as well, is a history of being a profession. and that profession is very specifically regulated by certain regulators, and we have the government and we have bar associations and other similar things that set out regulations and that impose conservatism in many cases. So you can see, again, a huge difference from the United States. I'm Canadian, by the way, so don't mix up my talking about the US with any affiliation. But where you see, I mentioned the US because it is like the global leading legal market and impacts every other legal market. So you can see in the US, you have bar association regulations that say law firms can only be owned by lawyers, right? And that imposes certain level of conservatism. And in the UK, there's been a big change in terms of the regulation of law firm ownerships. And they have alternative business structures now that allow for certain types of ownership that have allowed for a whole new level of innovation, including the introduction of technology into practicing law. Because from a traditional law firm perspective, it's unimaginable to have 93% of your inquiries handled by technology, right? I can say for us, it's 100% by humans, and then the question is to what extent are tools helping those humans? So that's all big background. In terms of how much AI is currently impacting the legal industry, I'd say it's not that much, to be honest. Far less than finance and healthcare, I would believe. Every single law firm that you talk to is involved in some kind of pilot project, some kind of testing, some kind of discussion. And all of us take it really seriously. And when we were talking ahead of this course, I think the framing of the question was, what impact will it have in the next 10 years? And we have the classic issue of underestimating the amount of change in the next 1 year or 2 years, and then, overestimating in the next 1 year or 2 years, underestimating across 10 years. So how much of an impact AI will have across 10 years, if I knew that, I'd probably make a lot more money than I do now. But I will say, from having worked with lawyers for a long time, I know that the answer is it depends. And it depends on what the regulatory environment is going to be. And I think you started this question with clients, and for us, a big element is that it does depend on what we think of the implementation of AI and what clients think. And there's a lot of different viewpoints. Thomson Reuters does a lot of research on this and just had a study on the future of the professions, a survey that they do every year that looks at law and accounting and some other related professions. And when you survey clients and ask them, do you think your outside law firms should be using generative AI, you get very mixed responses. Most of you know that law firms traditionally charge hourly rates, right? All we charge is our input. The days of law firms purely charging hourly rates are quite far behind us, and we usually have much clearer budgets now. But if you think of it from a client perspective, if generative AI helps you generate a response to a legal issue in a much shorter amount of time, clients would expect that that value gets passed on to them, and therefore it's a good thing from their perspective. But as Kunyo primed with this question, there's obviously lots of concerns, and the prime concern being around confidentiality. So within our firm, we have very strict limits that no one can input client data or client-related inquiries into any public AI system, because we know, in our interpretation, that is a breach of our client confidentiality, right? And especially to the extent that such a model, any large language model, learns from the prompt and uses that data in the future in some way. So making sure that and this is, I think, why law firms are all engaged in different levels of pilot projects, because we need to ensure that our systems that we are introducing completely respect client confidentiality. In some jurisdictions, there's an added layer or nuance of that, which is around attorney-client privilege. And we need to separate just the confidentiality of the information from breaching the attorney-client privilege. And I know, again, in the US, many law firms are completely staying out of generative AI at this point because they interpret that even in a privately controlled system in which you control the data, there is risk of breaching attorney-client privilege through disclosure. So confidentiality is one element. Certainly data privacy is another related element of that. And so when you have people like Thomson Reuters going out to clients asking that question, the results roughly of their survey just a couple months ago, something like 50 to 55% of clients say they think their law firms should be using generative AI. About 25% say they definitely should not be using generative AI. And then you have a mix of remaining people saying, I have no idea. I need to take Ajahn Yog's course to figure it out. So I think one challenge that's going to present to us as a law firm is that we're going to have differing expectations among clients. We're going to see some clients who are very conservative, who will say, never use my data in your generative AI system. Some who will say, please use your generative AI for everything and don't charge me anything for it. And I hope that this advice only takes you 15 minutes instead of 5 hours. And then some who will be in between. And so we need to think of how that's going to work for us. So in terms of how we're using it now and what we see as the potential for it, I think within a law firm, we need to have a distinction between the practice of law and the business of law. And I think Kun Sutapa was just getting to that in terms of, you know, the actual service they're offering and then the kind of supporting processes. So for the practice of law, our experience so far with our own pilots, which we've done several, is it's excellent for idea generation. Many of us have that experience, right? You have blank page problems. Someone is trying to think through a problem and you can interact with generative AI to try to work through the starting point of that. So idea generation is use case number one for us in the practice. Use case number two, I think, would be summarization. We've seen it's gotten a lot better, depending on which system you're using, at summarizing long documents. And that could go from as little as summarizing a one-page email to be one sentence so that I read it quickly on my phone, or summarizing a 400 or 500-page document down to a few paragraphs, and then having a back and forth with the generative AI about the content, digging into things that are interesting. And of course, the number one concern, I should say number two concern after client confidentiality is hallucinations and accuracy. So maybe we can talk about that later. Let's park that aside. But let's say for now, let's assume we're seeing a lot of improvement on summarization. So idea generation, summarization, and then I think the big next two are knowledge extraction is the first one, and then actual document drafting as the last one. So when we think about knowledge extraction, within a law firm, all we have, the whole business, is this bunch of lawyers who show up every day. And we hope they come back the next day. And you know, the sum total of what we can offer to clients is the knowledge that we have. That's the knowledge that's in the head of those lawyers. And we do a lot of work internally. Historically, law firms have always done this to try to centralize that knowledge to make the provision of services more efficient in the future. So in the past, that was a library, it was templates, and things like that. So we do see huge potential for generative AI to help with knowledge extraction across really big data sources, to be able to pull out who in the firm has ever done something like this, a client with this type of complex problem in this country, with this set of facts and circumstances, what precedent advice do we have, and then actually that's in the extraction, and then work with the generative AI in the drafting. Okay, now let's work together, make a first draft, or review a document and say, you know, here's the draft I've got, let's compare that to 500 other lease agreements that we've done over the last 2 years, and are there any clauses in mine that seem non-standard? I think that's where we see the great promise in the practice of law. And then on the business of law side, we, like any other company, have HR teams and IT teams doing software development who are using GitHub Copilot to speed up their software development. And historically, law firms have had tons of secretaries doing all kinds of admin work and lots of other people doing document preparation and other things like that. So some of us inside the firm are using Microsoft Copilot now, and you can see the potential for speeding up administrative tasks, making them more efficient, and therefore increasing the productivity of both lawyers and other professionals within the firm. And then another key element that I think is more specific to our jurisdictions is translation. We have a big translation team internally because we are doing lots of work for multinational investors coming into Southeast Asia. And we have people working on translation English to Thai, Khmer to English, Vietnamese to Chinese. There's tons of translation happening all the time, right? So we're seeing much better results with large language models and generative AI than we saw in prior machine learning-based machine translation solutions. And so I think that's one where we see a big benefit in the business of law. Another is that lawyers do lots of legal work, and they do lots of other types of work, reviewing draft invoices that are going to clients, writing articles for marketing purposes. And when we've done pilots, we actually see lawyers finding a lot of benefits in taking an article they've got and having generative AI summarize that article in a LinkedIn post that they could post. You know, things like that are very practical and easy, but that speed up everyone's work a lot. So I think we see big promise within the firm, both on the practice of law side and on the business of law side.
Very interesting. Well, we're going to hear from each of you, and then let's talk about this thing a little bit further. I just would like to sort of pick some very interesting points. I want to talk about it a bit later after Dr. Waty talk about her field. But I think one keyword is this human in the loop, which is quite interesting because it's kind of like, it sort of reminds me of how you actually orchestrate the way that technology and human work together to optimize the services or any kind of product that you are trying to make, which is very interesting. And one thing that you mentioned about is the way that, clients or customers come to you, their prior, their expectation, their knowledge. This is very interesting because it also affects a lot the way that you can adopt technology, and it will lead to this kind of like investment decision that you will have as well, which is very interesting. I'll come back to that because I heard that from finance you can develop pretty much everything, and that is the foundation of your business from the very beginning. But for the law firm, there is an existing legacy that you probably have to overcome and beat them as well. That's very interesting, and I think we're going to hear some similarity and, of course, some very unique perspective from the healthcare and medicine. So, Dr. Waty, please, how has AI been affecting this industry?
Sure. So, first and foremost, I'd like to say that in the field of medicine, it is definitely defined as a mission-critical area where all tasks making a mistake can be very costly to human health and human life. And therefore, we do care very much about how AI works, how it does not work, especially and where things can fail, because we really want to avoid all of those problems. That said, I do have to say that AI is not a bubble. As a technology, it is a one-way train. We definitely need it going forward into the future. In what way or form it's going to develop, that we are not sure. And that is why it is, I think, very exciting for all fields, maybe finance, medicine, or law, to come together and ride this wave. AI in itself is what I think we should consider as one of the punctuated evolution type technologies that's going to change how the whole society is going to operate. And now is the perfect time for all of us to jump onto the train, to give our 2 cents and help shape how it's going to develop. Let's talk about this opportunity in medicine using AI. one thing is for sure, if we look at the world population as a whole, it's been growing exponentially, very fast over the past few years. We've passed the 7 billion mark very recently. And if you look at the longevity, lifespan of humans, it's gone way above any average you can see over the past many decades ago. What this means is that we are facing a situation where there's an awful lot of patients, very few doctors to take care of the patients as time goes by. And doctors are they're specialized professions. They take a long time to train, just like lawyers, and they're very far and few of them. So in order to meet the demand in the future, technology has to step in. We don't have a choice. Technology has to step in order to help alleviate the needs, the pressure, the demand from the healthcare side. On the other side of what the pros, the benefits of the technology is that with AI, because it can compute so fast and take in so much information, it is the perfect technology actually to look into testable hypotheses and patterns with large amounts of data that no one human can go over within a lifetime or within operational workflow timescales, right? A simple example is just in the ICU. So let's just say a person is hooked up and there's all these data coming out of the person, maybe the SpO2 time waveform, the respiratory rate, and so on and so forth. And it's constantly churning out this information, which gives us an indication of the human body, how it's working under different states of health and disease. The doctor then who comes in to treat the patient only gets to see it in snapshots, only during visits and only at summary charts, or the monitor at the time at which the doctor comes in. And the doctor then has to rely a lot on their experience in order to decide what to do next with the patient. The issue here is that there's an awful lot of information that's being lost. And so that is part of the great interest and excitement that we have in using all these electronic health records in order to provide better care, better support really for the doctors. And this brings us back also to one of the topics that the panelists have mentioned. So it's about who's responsible for the decision making in these things. Now, in mission critical tasks, and me also not a doctor, but as a patient wearing the hat of a patient, I'm actually leaning towards the side of, I do think we need the humans to do it. Primarily from a technological point of view, technology is just not, it's intelligent enough to do tasks faster with more standardization and to pull out features that the human might not have made that connection within their mind, right? But at the end of the day, the technology is not very good at extrapolating what it has learned from the data it's seen into new ideas, unlike humans who can connect a lot of things and dynamically change and fact check itself. So for me, the whole human in the loop idea of how AI should come into play is definitely the way forward. I think automation is a bit far-fetched for us unless it's a very low-level task with lower risks towards the end patients for use. It definitely has to be a human-in-the-loop format. So if we talk about the human-in-the-loop then, this does not just mean that the person is in the loop deciding the decision with the machine alone. Definitely that's important because, like Mr. Andrew has mentioned, you'd like to really have this human-machine collaboration type format, and we definitely second that in the way that we develop different technologies in AI. Because I think the dream here is that if AI can do a lot of repetitive tasks with better accuracy and over a larger amount of information to find very tight correlations of trends and patterns, but is unable to link it to the bigger picture with worldviews and background knowledge and context, then what better way to actually bring the best out of it at this point in time than to find technologies that can combine the best of human and machine intelligence. So thus human in the loop is here to stay for a while. However, if we do take a step back the way that artificial intelligence is trying to develop itself. And I repeat again that the technology is not there, but we are working to make it become more intelligent. There should come a day when it has the capability to actually do extrapolation, creativity, idea generation that is based on induction and logic and not just pattern matching, something that is closer to the way the human thinks. And at that point, we can start talking about automating some of the tasks with more robustness and reliability and safety for the patients. So tasks that are closer to things that very highly trained humans can do, and do it even better because it has more data. But we're definitely not there yet. The next thing I'd like to talk about is focus on the practical side of AI. So like what Mr. Andrew said, there's an awful lot of people who have interest right now from different industries, law, medicine, who are looking to tinker and design, which is a great thing, different AI technologies to see if they can design it so that they're specialized and fit for purpose. And those are great because it develops a prototype and a proof of concept of what it can do. Bringing that forward translation-wise in order to get it to work in society is actually another can of worms. Because now we're looking to make sure that the technology also is able to fit into a workflow at the time scales of the profession and to be able to scale at the institutional level. So all of these things are important, and the scaling part at an institutional level is something that we are having a lot of problems with. You know, the thing with the workflow, fitting into the workflow and the timescale can be overcome by co-designing it with end users like the doctors. But when it comes to institutional uptake, we now have to worry a lot more with impact measures over time. More importantly, risk assessment, risk management of the tool over time. We have to worry about audits, which we like, by the way. So audits are there for a purpose, but the shape of or form of how it's supposed to be done, nobody's quite sure. And this is why I'm so excited to be here in this panel, speaking to young lawyers and hearing from all of you, because I think lawyers are going to play, and regulators, people are going to play a really large role. We're at a point where it's not clear how the whole regulation of this technology should be in order to ensure safety for the end users over time and keep the system running so that we don't have these accidental black markets popping up in a bad way, right? Now, down to this opportunity on the human level then, in terms of the workflow, which we mentioned before, the opportunity, I think, is really for professions to embrace the use of AI. Now, I understand that in law, like in medicine, there's a self-selection, right, of people who are very skeptical, very analytical, very critical. And that's necessary. I completely respect that. And I actually prefer that my lawyers and my doctors are like that. And honestly, as a technologist, I also embrace that skepticism. The reason is because, honestly, if I sit down and actually listen to all of the concerns that lawyers and doctors voice about the technology, that actually can be turned around into a problem statement that we can solve technologically, right? In order to shape the way that the technology is going to evolve. And at the same time, that level of collaboration with doctors or lawyers could also help us from the technology side understand what we need to do in order to get things truly in translation. So with that, I do very much hope and pray that more professions in the law and medical industry will get involved in bits and pieces of the actual development, train, test loop to develop things that are fit for purpose within their industry. Now, the very last thing I'd like to bring up is AI as a technology today is is, as you've heard from Ajahn Ekapon, it's really a pattern matching machine. That's just the way the technology is today. It's developing probabilistic models from patterns that it sees within the data. And then from that, it learns a trend, co-occurrences of things, and then it predicts whatever tasks you want it to predict based on the correlations and co-occurrences that it has learned from the data itself. Now, that kind of a model, by definition, is not fit for purpose. If you wanted to do a task that replaces a human to make a decision, such as diagnosis or decision of treatment. Why? Because it's still based on a probabilistic model. So one area on top of generative AI and all of these things that people are very excited about, the area that I think needs to develop further and is understudied at the moment is the idea of causation, causality studies. So unless we have something like a causality study that can form the backbone of a generalizable model, it might not be perfect, but something more human interpretable, something that you can actually go in and understand and fix and predict where it goes wrong and pinpoint where it goes wrong. And that's important, right? For me as an engineer and safety, it is of utmost important, because if you don't understand how something works, it doesn't matter how well it works today. You don't understand how it works, you can't fix it when it goes wrong, you can't even preempt when it's going to go wrong. And that to me is a great liability. And with that, I think I end my 2 cents on the opportunities.
Well, thank you very much. I think we come back and talk about this sort of by design thing, and pretty much it will come back when we discuss the way that we work together going forward. And you mentioned about accountability, which is, I think, very important. And the term that we have been introduced in the past few lectures, explainability, it has come up again. And I think this is very interesting as well, because may I call you Picoy instead of Dr. Yes, yeah. It's more familiar that way. Yeah, because you mentioned about your industry as well. And explainability that Dr. Waty mentioned about is something that I think if I want to get a loan from your company, maybe that's something I want to ask you, like, why did you reject my credit? But I think there might be something else that you want to add on this as well, if you may, please.
Thank you for the question, and thank you so much for a lot of the comments that coming from my fellow panelists. I think I have it's a great starting point for a much longer debate about what we see as potential hopes and hypes of AI. Just to respond to Dr. Yok's questions about if he applied to my Money Thunder app, he would get rejected purely because his income level is not underbanked. So, so we don't need AI to decide on that. I think it would just show up flashing that someone imposter is coming this way. But in any case, I want to respond back to what Kun Andrew has mentioned about lawyer is currently now all human facing. It's all client-facing services using human in the back end, and that has always been the case in banking industry until we have ATM. Obviously, this is something of some kind of dinosaur in the past. We see less ATM right now, but it used to be that people have to go to branches and then tell the banker, tell the tellers who they are, and the teller have to believe who they are, and then allow them to withdraw their own money. And now ATM came with technology. So I think it's the same thing with AI nowadays. It's basically lower the cost, increase efficiency, provide greater accuracy, and therefore allow democratization of services. For example, think about wealth management. Right now, all the wealth management is being handled by a very small number of licensed trained professionals. But nowadays, you can trade without, on the online platform without having to use brokers. And that's democratizing because smaller volume, less wealth can get the service that used to be quite exclusive to a certain group of clients. I think the law will eventually develop into that area. As Andrew mentioned, there's so many levels of sophistication that requires the service. When we look at how the service has been democratizing, it's very clear in the lending space. I'm not sure how many of you had taken economics. Thai people have a very high penetration in saving. You can just go to convenience stores and open bank accounts within an hour. The longest is an hour. A lot of people have multiple bank accounts. But do you know that more than 40% of Thai households still borrow from informal lender in some degree? 42% to be exact. So that's a really huge number, given that Thai banking industry has been one of the most stable in the region, if not the world at large. And that's come with some reason, because it's heavily human-based. In the back end, if you use human underwriter, there are certain costs of operating or servicing one loan, right? So the smallest number of using human underwriter in the back end, the loan size needs to be about 10 to 20,000 baht to make sense of the economics. But some people can just need a few thousand just to start their, or even 1,000 just to kickstart or help them through emergency funding. And that's how technology can help. Without using any human underwriting in the back end, at least what we operate can offer the loan within 10 minutes from downloading to receiving money. We can underwrite as small as 800 baht. You would think that 800 baht, what difference does it make? It makes a huge difference. We have so many letters coming to thank us that we're helping them in the darkest day of their lives to actually help start, and now they become a very successful entrepreneur in their own rights, building the credit histories, and now they have, building their credit history enough to be able to apply for bank loans. And from that matters, I want to say that all the technology, financial, law, healthcare, education, would allow democratization of the services. And I would say because it brings the cost down, that the service can be available to the mass. Then we have another question related to, so what is democratizing for players? And that's when the equation's flipped. Because for technology, it's always it's a natural monopolistic in nature, which means that people who have better resources, more data accumulation would have a much better market power and ability to make sure that the technology would only be allowed within the group of network. And therefore, you as future lawyers, future regulators, one thing that you need to looking very closely about the adoption of technology is that when it comes to the mass, there are real discriminatory factors at play. For example, people who are financially literate is much better served financially than financially illiterate people. People who are digitally literate is much better served than people who are not. And therefore, when a company design user journey, user experience, for people with a flip phone and people with smartphone, do they get the same service? Think about the fiscal measure, fiscal stimulation programs. If it's only allow people with smartphones to access, is it a fair use of tax money? These are all regulations and something that as lawyers you need to think in the back of your mind. And that's from a consumer perspective. There's also another discriminatory factor on the player as well. And think about the big players versus small players. A lot of the regulators and regulations listen to big players about the challenges limitations and therefore draft the regulations on top of that. Some industry, especially AI, is now being self-initiated by the big player to draft the guideline. A lot of these can be extremely exclusive. And this is something that, as a regulator, future regulators should need to keep that in mind, keep that in check. Big tech, do they have sovereignty power over other jurisdictions purely because of the service that's provided to the recipient countries is not properly checked or properly governed, and these are something that we need to keep in mind going into the future. Then I want to talk about the high level of skepticism. I absolutely agree with Dr. Waty and Andrew about skepticism is necessary, and it's necessary for any profession, I would say, especially in finance, because for lending, it's all about risk ranking. For wealth management, it's about risk ranking. And you want to make sure that we understand risk, and that's comes with a certain level of skepticism. So you can think it's actually quite the opposite of when a technologist came into offering this kind of service. They are not generally trained to looking at risk. And therefore, regulations happen for a reason, as Kun Andrew mentioned. It's not someone just wake up one day and they want to impose regulations on something. It's because we have had crises, because we have had fraud, and therefore we set up this crisis. So these are something that needs to balance going forward, because regulation makes market. We want to make sure that that market is just.
Well, it's so interesting. I think probably let's talk about this for a little while, and then we just move on to some other things later. I think I see one picture here, which is I would like to sort of, well, again from the floor, if you have any kind of like input, please. Well, you mentioned about democratization. And I think you were putting your economics hat on when you talk about this kind of mechanism, which is very interesting, because when we talk about AI law or regulation, we normally sort of forget to think about one very effective tool, which is the market itself. And you mentioned about this kind of like, well, if I may, I put it as a sort of like market barrier to a certain extent. And I remember reading the book by Richard Susskind. I think he discussed a lot this kind of market barrier imposed by lawyers. And it's very interesting because it's such a natural sort of reaction to any threat in any kind of industry that if you see something coming, and the direct consequence of using it, at least in the short term, is to lower your return. The natural reaction is pretty much to say, it's probably not something that we should use. Not yet, but in the longer term, I mean, you are COO, you are at what level above those lawyers, so you have to...
They might not agree with that.
No, but in terms of, you have to sort of try to, well, find the best way to operate the firm, and having lawyers as, of course, integral part of it, but not everything. So this is very interesting because if you have faith in the market, sometimes you have this kind of like AI application, and you believe that it's going to trigger new players to come in and democratize the services. Eventually, some of the worries that we have would probably be mitigated by the market mechanism itself. Some, yes, of course, because that will pretty much rely on so many assumptions that you have to believe as well that your clients or consumers are literate in these kind of like adverse consequences that may happen to you. So in finance, let's talk about the way, because now we talk about a bit of concerns And let's get into a bit of detail about, is there any kind of difference, like sort of fundamental difference in terms of concerns? Because, I mean, we talk about accountability, we talk about transparency, we talk about biases, but we know that there are so many tools, right? Hard or soft regulations, market mechanism itself. And we know that if things go wrong, it probably affect people who are clients in the financial industry differently from client in the legal and health industry. So let's talk about this particular thing, this kind of mechanisms that you think would sort of fit base in your view when it comes to the application that will regulate or would be able to mitigate the concerns that you mentioned about.
Fundamentally, at least for now in the legal industry, legal advice has to be provided by humans, right? Someone who is a qualified lawyer needs to be providing the advice, and I think that is, as far as I know, pretty universally true in most jurisdictions in the world. So we've talked about human in the loop approach, and I think at least in the medium term, we expect that to continue to be the case in the legal industry, that lawyers or potentially non-lawyers will be interacting with generative AI, and where those tools come from in terms of big tech and kind of the limitations on the market is a very interesting thing to discuss. So somehow we're sourcing some tools, and then we are having generative AI be part of the solution. I actually really like your ATM parallel. I think that's an interesting way to think about it. And when I think about this, I'm going to go on a tangent for a minute, but when I think about how transformative generative AI will be, one of the benchmarks that I use in the legal industry is word processing and computers. You know, I said in my introduction, I've been at Tilleke for 18 years. So I have the privilege, we have lots of long-serving colleagues in Tilleke, and I have the privilege of knowing some colleagues who've now retired, but were there when I was there, who told me about being in the firm in the 70s, and you type a contract, and it's 30, 35, 40 pages, and then somebody wants to change something, and you just retype those 40 pages with your changes, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine now what that was like. So you think about how transformative word processing and computerization was, and I think we have every reason to believe that generative AI will be at least that transformative moving forward. But I still think there will be that human doing that review, at least in the medium term. Maybe we can come back to the big tech one, because I don't want to forget that. But when we talk about challenges within the legal industry, one of the huge challenges we do have is around lawyer development, professional development, skills development. And all of you are in this very exciting new LL Bell class, which is great. And I think Kun Yok and Ajahn Tơi and everybody here is doing amazing things to try to get the next generation of lawyers ready. But I will say in Thailand, in Vietnam, in the US, in the UK, in Canada, it's a universal thing that lawyers coming into law, that law school graduates coming into law firms are in no way prepared to do the job of being lawyers. And what we've relied on historically is kind of a mentorship model, right? If you go to a law firm in the UK, you walk into their office, a trainee sits in an office with a partner and learns by osmosis, listens to that partner taking client calls, chit-chats along the way. And one of the big criticisms of large corporate clients of law firms of the past many years is that the clients are paying for those junior lawyers to get trained. In a US law firm, a fresh graduate lawyer is making $220,000 a year, is charging out at $800 an hour, and has no real idea what they're doing. So many clients started to refuse to pay for the time of first and second year lawyers because they think it's really the firm's job to teach those lawyers. And fair enough. I think when we talk about generative AI, and I said moments ago that one of the things it's great at now is to review a 500-page document and give me a 3/4 of a page summary with clear bullet points around the essential elements. Historically, I think that has been fundamental. That kind of task, which you might say is boring or grunt work type task, reviewing lots of documents, marking some notes, is a lot of how young lawyers have learned how to become strong lawyers. And so within our firm and within many other firms, we envision a future. Of course, it's always human in the loop. There will always be a person there interacting with that generative AI. But how do we, and our partners now all have that judgment. They've figured it out through years of kind of mentoring and training, how to exercise judgment, use their analytical skills, be creative, think from the client's perspective, try to solve the client's kind of commercial problem. They would say they learn that by doing all these things like reviewing a 500-page document, having a big binder of documents and trying to go through it. So if generative AI is, and staring at a blank page and trying to think about how am I going to fill up this page with my knowledge. And I think that one of the big debates in law firms now is what are we going to do, need to do differently in terms of professional development and training to get lawyers established in the level of critical thinking and business judgment and business acumen, everything else they need, while working with generative AI.
I think I sort of noticed one thing. I'm going to ask Dr. Waty first, and then I'll come to ask you later, because it seems like, well, we talk about profession now, and it's sort of like one of the main concerns, not really concern, but constraint, if I may, is the adoption of these professionals themselves. I would imagine that pretty much the same thing would happen in the medical industry as well, right, Dr. Waty, when it comes to these this kind of adoption of the technology, which is probably a good thing, right? I mean, you sort of slow to transition, and sort of probably you could be more vigilant when it comes to the transition. Is that something that ongoing in your industry as well?
Oh, yeah. I definitely resonate with everything that Dr. Sutapa and Andrew have mentioned so far, which is the main points are exclusion and inequalities, which regulators and lawyers can come into. That's Dr. Sutapa's point, as well as professional development, which is a big, important step going forward for adoption, as well as shaping the technology, how it's going to be used. And that was Andrew's main point. Now, I think that there are some other points I'd like to add on to these two, which is apparent in the field that I work in, and I think would probably be the same in the other fields as well. But of course, the panelists, please let me know what your thoughts are. And one of it is just adding on to the whole professional development idea. I think that what is really important here is to actually learn to become very efficient consumers of information just because the technology is new. AI is still shaping and forming into the future. It's not like medicine as the core subject where it's been there for centuries. And so now it's fixed in its form. It's got standardization. There are textbooks you can learn from. With AI right now, we're right at the frontier of things changing, and nobody knows how it's going to evolve. Every so often you get to see a new technology coming up. If you follow the papers, there are thousands of papers coming out every month. It's really hard to keep up, but you don't have to, as lawyers, professionals like lawyers or medical professionals who I work with, it's not really necessary to know everything in detail. I think understanding the core logic generally of how things work in the different themes of AI technologies. So what are the logical components that make it work and get categorized in those fields? That's number one. Two, where are the hot spots of industries that are adopting those technologies? And three, most importantly, things that can go wrong. I think being able to have that foresight is something that I, as a consumer, would look to regulations and lawyers for help. There are so many technologies out there that I use in my daily life. I have no clue how it works, but I use it anyway. And I use it anyway because I feel safe. I actually have trust in the system. Doesn't work 100%. Of course, there's always black markets and things that can go wrong too, in terms of governing a society and all these different mechanics that are making the society work. But on the whole, I believe in the law, I believe in the regulations, and I believe that for the most part, things that I adopt and use in real life will not have a very, very high frequency of disasters. Let me put it to you this way. And so forward looking is really important. If we dive down deeper into what can go wrong and things that I would invite you as young lawyers and the future of the world to maybe help us technologists and people who are trying to develop things in different industries, and also the end users, so my clinician partners who will be using it, are two main things for now. There are many things, but two main things I'd like to bring up. Number one is to have a temporal dynamic view of a product. So what does this mean, right? So this is usually when people look at regulating a product, they take a snapshot and look at it as of today. You analyze everything as of today, the components are fixed, the parameters are fixed, everything is fixed. Is it fit for use? And therefore, do you approve it or not? The problem with AI is that we can't really think of it like that. We have spoken about this before, that AI technology, it doesn't matter if it's generative AI or if it's predictive AI model. The model is basically, well, that's it. It's a big, ginormous equation. It's a big model that is taking a ton of data inputs and looking to learn that joint probability distribution of co-occurrences as well as correlations to learn the trends and then predict on a task. But because inherently it has to learn from pattern matching from things that goes in, and it's a pattern matching machine with not really the same level of reasoning that a human has, it's very easy for it to mispredict on things that it was not trained on or it has not seen, right? And so the forward-looking part, it takes a step further. Say let's do a mind experiment as of today. You had all of the data in the world, all 7 billion people, somehow you had all of their data, and a supercomputer to train the best machine in the world. So it knows every comorbidity, every disease on this planet Earth, and the whole lifetime trajectory of a person. And you are able to train this machine so it's like better than ChatGPT. It just knows everything as of today. So on the timeline, that's today. It's trained on everything that happened in the past, right? So at this point, if you start using this machine to then advise how doctors are going to function going forward in time, over the short period into the future, it will do well. Why? Because the profile of those patients right after the launch of the machine is going to look pretty close, right? Similar to the data that was used to train the machine from early on at that point. But now, inherently, if you think about it, these technologies that are designed to help with decision making, right, are going to influence the decision of the people, so in this case the doctors, on the patients going forward in time. The trajectory of their healthcare changes. The profiles of the comorbidity changes because of that intervention. So as time goes by, inherently, you will start to drift so that your AI technology becomes obsolete. The parameters that it learned from the data no longer, that pattern that it has learned basically does not repeat itself as much in the future. And the conundrum here is that the most promising and successful technologies that people are excited about and would uptake are the ones that will go obsolete fastest, because it is the thing that will scale the fastest, and it will be the thing that will have the largest effect on mankind, which will therefore change the data profile that was used into the future against that was used in the past to train it. So regulation as of today, has a bit of a problem for safety. And I'm always focused on safety because of the field I'm in, do no harm, right? If it's fixed like that, we do have a problem, because what that means is that every time you get a technology, you get an approval, okay, you start using it for a while, and then at some point you could have all the snazziest technology in the back end to track whether or not you are deviating, like the population data is deviating, and therefore you need to retrain or update your data. But update your model. But the problem is that when that does happen, what do I need to do as a technologist? I'll have to go back again through the whole regulatory pathway process in order to get the new model with the new training values and all of that to get approved. So that is something to think about, because in the day and age today, when we have an AI machine instead of a machine that has nuts and bolts that are fixed, the AI machine is supposed to be an intelligent, dynamic machine that is learning over time. So there needs to be a new framework somehow to assure the safety so that it can also ride that temporal dynamic change. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how that is going to be able to, to be designed or to even think about, so that you can ensure the balance between efficiency of the markets in terms of regulatory approval and overseeing versus the dynamic change that are to come. So dynamic view is important, and the way you can equip yourself, everyone in any field who's not an AI specialist, is just to focus really much on the different things that can go wrong over time across different topics of AI. The last thing I'd like to talk about a bit deeper is bias. Do I have time for this, Dr. Yo? Like 5 more minutes to talk about bias? I think I did spend a lot of time on the dynamic. Yeah?
Maybe we come back. We come back to that in the last question anyway. Probably it's time to do a quick break here on the floor.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's do that.
All right. Thank you. I think I want to come back and talk about. We have a bit pessimistic of it, don't we? Because the title is like opportunities.
I'm
like lawyers.
Opportunities and challenges. But this is my bad. It's my bad as a lawyer. Probably I sort of conduct it that way because a lawyer. Yeah. So let's come back, and I think I really like, and I want to straight that again. This, if I may, refresh rate of the regulation. We really need it to be sort of synchronized with the rate of technology as well, and the way that you're going to conduct that is really difficult, and that is why you need lawyer, maybe. So let's come back and let's take a quick break for roughly 10 minutes, and then we come back and we discuss further on the opportunities and how can these challenges could be mitigated while we can still maximizing the opportunities ahead. All right, and I would like to open the floor, opportunity for the floor to ask the questions as well. So let's have a quick 10 minutes break, please. Yeah. All right, let's continue our panel discussion. I think from the first half we've learned a lot. We've learned so many opportunities. We talk about the way forward, how technology has been used, but at the same time we've seen that it is pretty much things in progress, right? Pretty much every single industry. Some are faster than the other, but we've seen this kind of like adoption rate that might be different across different industries, and we do talk about a bit of concerns as well. And I think the theme, today, pretty much the theme of this whole course, like 14 lectures that we have, is to discuss this kind of like, how would you really strike a balance there? Because we know that, the bottom line is if you don't understand the technology at all, and I think, all of the panelists here talk about it implicitly or explicitly that if you don't really understand the limits of technology, what it can do and what it can't do, it's almost impossible that you will regulate it. And another very interesting thing is we are, all the panelists are from industries, and well, you can see one point that it's pretty much one picture that you can draw from here is you have technology, but the technology will be used in so many different applications, and that will lead to different consequences. And I think one thing that we have to bear in mind is when you regulate or you impose any kind of like laws or obligations, the level of the unit of analysis is normally not the technology itself, it's the activities, and that is pretty much something that you really have to bear in mind. Okay, so let's continue our conversation. I think I want to talk to all of you about the way forward. Just in general first, what do you think is ongoing when it comes to this kind of like, well, technology regulation? What kind of like your take on the maybe in a very macro level? What's the way forward, or what is the key things that they have to bear in mind going forward? Can we start? Yes.
I think I come from financial industry, where it's one of the most highly regulated industry across all, and it's for a good reason, because we have crises in the past, and we do not want to go through the same episode again, and that's why these regulations came into being. In a sense, AI, I want to look at all technologies, and AI especially, as utility. For example, think about how you would regulate electricity. You wouldn't, but you would regulate the use of electricity. So when we use AI or generative AI to help with offering financial services, the problem and the activity of offering still quite similar, even if we don't have technologies in the back end. So the regulation should still be valid, regardless of whether we use technology or not. For example, for risk modeling, if I use human in the back end, I think explainability will still be required, transparency, safety of the data, accuracy and risk ranking has to be able to be justified. And now that we use machine learning in the back end, obviously explainability is harder to come by, but it's still a requirement, and I think for good reason. And so are all the other requirements that I mentioned prior. And therefore, when you think about an AI or generative AI in the legal framework, in the healthcare framework, in the education framework, these are the things that are not quite different in terms of protection for consumer, protection of society, inequality of the service offered. These are everything that needs to be governed. And that's my short takes on that. However, I want to also add into that is I feel that for generative AI, I think Dr. Waty has mentioned an interesting point is at this point, it's not quite a threat just yet. But again, in the back of the developer's mind, they need to understand the inner working of the technology in order to become aware of what can go wrong. And regular human audit is important. But regular human audit cannot just be among technologists. I feel that because we are in the inflection points where everyone will be participating in developing and improving the generative AI model. And therefore, we as a society has a direct impact on their services or their development or what they will offer or not offer the service to someone. And therefore, and in that sense, the auditing needs to be done in all aspects of society, not just technologists. So I want to be very mindful, I say that we want to be very mindful about self-initiated regulation or guidelines or government regulations that only takes inputs from big players. be it technologists, be it finance, be it legal.
Well, thank you. Kurantri, anything you...
On the topic of regulation, I think I need to come back to our firm with the two different hats on in terms of practice of law and business of law. From the perspective of practice of law, we proudly represent many of those big super tech players, and are, mindful of working with them in terms of their own approach to regulation and working with the government. But at the same time, we act for many of the world's leading fintech players, many of the world's leading life sciences and healthcare players. And I think what we see is similar along the lines of what Dr. Sutapa said, that the regulation remains very industry specific. And it's about it's mostly the old regulation, and then how can we apply that to the new circumstances being brought about or enabled by generative AI. So I think that's happening on one side in terms of the practice of law. And then in terms of the business of law, this is a rare panel opportunity for me where I'm in the least regulated industry. And so I think up to now, other than the insistence on human in the loop approach in terms of actually having a human involved in being accountable for the legal advice that goes out, the legal opinion that we're issuing to the clients, we're not that heavily regulated, especially in countries in Southeast Asia, which is quite different from what we see in many Western jurisdictions where you have really active bar associations and a lot more professional indemnity type cases against law firms where courts are making decisions that are effectively regulation. So I think where we see more of a regulatory aspect probably is more self-imposed among how we are establishing our own best practice, how we are sharing knowledge with other law firms about what they're doing, so that we can align ourselves well and kind of learn best practices. And most importantly, the client voice within our firm. How can we, on both the business services side and the legal side, work closely with our clients to kind of shape the future in terms of how they and we are jointly going to be using generative AI to make sure that we achieve the best possible legal outcomes.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think that's so interesting. I think the trend nowadays is pretty much. Well, I'll go to medicine a bit later, but want to ask pretty much. It seems like because you mentioned about this kind of like, which is quite interesting. It's kind of like you say that okay, you can replace human input with technological input, and that is fine because that helps a lot on so many fronts. It's just faster, just like more accurate on certain tasks. But you just have to make sure that some of the things that human can deliver or probably be accountable, you just make sure that machine can pretty much do the same thing. Is that pretty much what you meant? Because you talk about this kind of explainability, as you said, like human used to be able to do that. And if you're going to use machine for that, basically you just need to make machine to be able to do the same. Yeah.
To a certain extent, I think it's consumer rights, and consumer rights do the same, regardless of whether machine's the one providing that service or human providing that service. So human rights do the same. I think my concern going forward is whether consumers know their rights, particularly when it comes to technology. In the past, especially during pandemic and after post-pandemic lifestyle, a lot of people, older generation especially, has been pushed on to use digital platforms much earlier than the government get the time to give them proper literacy. And therefore, there are some people who decided not to participate. They would not receive the service or the help that they would they were entitled to. Some people are scrambled to use and had some fraudulent activity attacking them from the stolen identities and what might be afterwards. And these are the things that we need to be very, very concerned in using technology, because not everyone is properly trained for that. And it's common, it's a public knowledge, it has a strong externality effect. And it needs to be provided by the central government on that front. And it's not just in school. It has to be all around. One thing that I find is before we start lending for about 5 years now. And before, when we do online lending, we never get questions asked like, who are you? Or are you regulated? What kind of information do you use? We always ask because we are GDPR compliant from day one, but we never get questions afterwards. And immediately during COVID and afterwards, people are much more equipped about their rights and become much more literate. And there's a lot of online help, or the bulletin board suggestions to identify the legal or illegal service providers. And I think that society is developed in a very fast pace to educate themselves. And I think that's a very good trend. We should not assume that the people who would not naturally adopt technology would stay idle. Because not only that the provider want to use technology to lower their costs, I think consumers are also demanding faster, more varied, more tailored for them. And so I think that's I think in that sense, when Dr. Yok was asking about the trend in regulation that I find concerning, is in some jurisdictions they name technology that can be used and regulate that one technology is allowed, another technologies are not, the rest are not. And I think that's quite dangerous, because then you sort of kill the spirit of innovation. In fact, it should be the outcome that gets to the consumer, right? If the consumer gets the better, cheaper, more secure, then the new technology should be allowed. Rather than fix the technology and therefore not allowing any other innovation to grow in that region.
I wanted to jump in a little bit on that issue of consumer protection and really the core issue of transparency. And I'm going to be really interested in Dr. Waty's view on this. So my comments are just a prime to come back to you, Dr. Waty. Which is that in legal, I think there's an ongoing debate and discussion right now about the issue of transparency. If a lawyer relies on generative AI to develop a legal opinion, does that lawyer have an obligation to disclose to the client how the extent to which they relied on generative AI in coming up with it? And it's a very unsettled issue. And I think it's an issue on which there's probably a stark difference between a firm like Tilleke, serving very sophisticated multinational companies, and people who are more involved in consumer law, where they may be using AI-based solutions to pre-qualify clients to fill out initial questionnaires, and the client may or may not know that they are interacting with AI at that stage. So I'm just interested in Dr. Waty's view in terms of transparency and disclosure to patients or to people interacting with the healthcare facilities in terms of the level of transparency and disclosure.
Oh, okay. So I'm all for transparency and disclosure, but the way I view the whole generative AI and ChatGPT is not that different from the World Wide Web. I mean, you can use the ChatGPT to generate the first draft, but then I assume that the professional will have to read through it and really be able to say that, yes, this represents my view, or no, I'm going to make some changes now because it doesn't exactly represent what I need to say or my stance on the issue.
So the responsibility still lies on the person who is going to be providing that service. As to what instrument that person is using in the back end, I'm less concerned about. As long as the person is able to say, I am responsible, I am accountable, and these are my words, I stand by it, I think that's all good and dandy. That's something that we also face on a side note in a different industry, which is education. I'm in a university. ChatGPT is everywhere, and students are using it up, down, left, right, and so are staff. The initial fear when it first came out a couple of years ago was, oh no, we can't have that. That's terrible. People are going to become stupid. They're just going to rely on ChatGPT and get it to do everything, the homework. What's the point? Oh dear, we're doomed. But, honestly, I don't really feel that way. It is here to stay. And honestly, now then I feel it's a blessing because now I can really grade and focus on ideas, logical consistency in their arguments, on their design. So it's about the thought process. And here's a tool, ChatGPT, that expedites the process of extracting a lot of information from the web and in the public so that they can assimilate. But the proper assimilation and reasoning still lies on the person. And you can pretty much, so I guess just to wrap up, I think that disclosure is all good. It's always good to disclose. But I don't think the degree of severity is any much more than if you say, oh yeah, before I drafted this document for you, I did search the web for ideas. I didn't memorize everything from books that I read, so it wasn't completely generated from my memory. I did have to look things up. I had to refer to books and prints and also ChatGPT to assimilate more ideas and thoughts. So that's my 2 cents on this.
I just want to add my 2 cents that I fully agree with you. And I find the debate about disclosure in the legal industry to be pretty interesting because I know we have at least one former Tilleke intern in this room. And we certainly don't disclose to clients that, hey, the research that I'm giving you in this legal opinion came from one of my interns, not from me. Therefore, I don't quite see the equivalent of why we need to disclose that something was generated working together with generative AI rather than through our own writing.
If I may add on this, I think from the financial operation, I think there's no harm to share with them what we use at all. In fact, it's almost helpful to tell. But one aspect that I want to discuss about this is I feel that human learning is changed dramatically, especially in universities such as what Dr. Waty is currently a faculty. But I feel that teaching in some institutions do not. And that is a real inequality there. So when it may not relate directly to law, but I feel it's very fundamental when teaching when teaching stay the same, but society moves on, the quality of learning hurts. And I think that's true for all disciplines, especially for future. For example, Dr. Waty has mentioned about the experts should be the one auditing the result that came from curation from generative AI, for example. That expert is being trained every day, but they may not be trained in the institutions where they're not quite aware how to move the professional efficiency with generative AI, for example, and that's concerning.
Well, because you talk about education, and I think this is actually a very good theme for the opportunity. I'm really curious from all of you. I mean, we can come back to talk about its concerns and about this sort of interaction with clients. But again, I mean, how should we adapt to that? How should we adapt to these technologies in which we sort of know that it exists and is there to exist, to stay, and would really help us in different professions? How can I teach these students from today on?
Can I jump in at this point?
Yeah.
If that's okay. I think the model of sponging up information is gone in this arena. We can't because the field is too new. It's really too new. It's changing day by day, year by year, month by month. Keep going, right? So because it's not a mature field, I don't think we can really teach the AI or things or even tools, because nobody knows. If you sit anyone down, that's why we're having this forum and this course, I suppose. Nobody really knows where the future is heading with this thing. So that's not bleak. That's actually quite exciting, but it requires a different kind of skill. So for me, it's about skills, the skill that allows you to work in a multidisciplinary team. In technology, we call that team science. So team science is that we are developing something, but we need everyone from business, finance to management, as well as the specialists within the field, and users, patient groups to give us feedback on the use, as well as the technologists themselves. The difficulty, I think, is to find that common ground now of issues that matter. So it's like a Venn diagram of all your specialty and knowledge from business, finance, technology, law, medicine, whatever. There is a Venn diagram where there is something in the middle that needs to be communicated in order for us to break through and go forward. Now, in order to reach that, there's a couple of things that is required. One of the things is literacy, like Dr. Sutapa has brought up. And for me, learning the literacy should be learned in a way that it's conceptual and dynamic, logically linked. It's not the exact thing that you will be memorizing, because gone are the days now that you can learn something and then plop that as a solution and just apply. As we've discussed at the very beginning of this forum, we are really, really quite fortunate to be right at the frontier, right at the edge of this technology, which is one of humankind's punctuated evolution in our progression, right, as a society. And nobody knows where to go. So learning to have that level of technical know-how, not so deep, but enough so that you have precision in the logic of what that term means. Yeah, not the details of the technology itself, the intuition and the logical link, so that you can connect and ask the right questions to other specialists in the field in order to formulate regulations or law, which could work. And this is not my field at all. That would be super useful. So the goal of learning for me, or at least when I teach in my course, and I do teach people who are not AI, because I'm in the Global Business School of Health, and we've got people coming with other pre-trained professions, such as we've got a lot of healthcare providers, a lot of engineers. We don't have lawyers yet, but and business folks. The idea is simply that: how do you develop on top of the traditional education, which gives you IQ, and then work practice internships that gives you EQ? How do you develop the TQ, the technological Q, so that you become an efficient consumer of information? You can read things in broad strokes and pick out the important things that matter, that could influence your design for the future of how to shape regulation and law. So for me, I think that's it.
Right. If I may add into this, thank you so much for raising this issue. I feel that new AI participants in society needs to be strong in fundamental knowledge. As Dr. Waty mentioned, the technology is very nascent. The application is immense and it has not happened yet. And therefore, knowledge in mathematics, science, logic, statistics, because that's basically the foundation of it. They need to understand that in order to, rather than jump into regulating or controlling or applying a new applications. I think that's very unfortunate, because it seems that a lot of the dialogue and discussions among education policies nowadays are focusing on coding, focusing on how to be the ready users of the technology that's not yet proven. Last year, quite a number of universities are talking about setting up a new faculty for metaverse. and as you can see, how long, the longevity of that technology perhaps it's come back, but a lot of it has to do with the application. So thank you for raising the fundamental knowledge. Another side of this that I think I'll wait until Andrew mentions something. I think you want to jump into this conversation, so.
I think in terms of preparing ourselves, if we go back just 6 months ago, all discussions among law firms were, we need to train our lawyers in prompt engineering. We need to hire prompt engineers. I think right now it's very clear that the tech companies are going to figure out how to make bad prompts good before we can figure out how to make bad lawyers good at prompting. Very, very clear. So, I think fundamentally I agree with both other panelists that it's about your underlying logic. It's about having clear critical thinking, bringing that critical thinking to how you interact with the technology. And within the legal industry, I think the really fundamental thing, every lawyer in a big law firm and every client we deal with is super smart, turned on, bright people who know what they're talking about. There's no credible lawyer at any law firm who doesn't understand the civil and commercial code, right? A lot of this comes down to how well do you understand the world? How well do you understand business? What is the client trying to achieve? More and more, our lawyers specialize in healthcare and life sciences, in finance, in other very specific industry sectors, because that's the only way we can serve our clients for the sophisticated, complex needs that they have. So, understanding the world, understanding what the clients want, and fundamentally, law firms serving clients is all about relationships. It's what problem do you have right now? How can I work with you to solve that problem? So empathy, compassion, these are not words that lawyers get associated with a lot, but I think fundamentally that is what it's about. It's about how our lawyers, enabled by technology, can deepen their relationships with clients and better serve those clients.
I think you mentioned a very interesting point, and I would like to stress them to the students as well. Tomorrow we're going to have a section on problems and concerns, like go deep into detail what kind of problem could arise. But one thing I think is so clear from our panelists is at the end of the day, you probably need this sort of interdisciplinary skills, of course, but your expertise, your core value is not to know engineering better than engineer, because that is super hard. It's almost impossible. Otherwise, you just be an engineer. But you need to understand it, because your role, I think probably in any profession, is you must be able to solve the problem, and solve the problem in the best possible way, given your domain. So you're going to learn a lot, all these biases, discrimination, and all these problems that could occur. But one solution to that is probably, as Andrew said, maybe the one who best solve it is the engineers themselves, because they probably can solve it tomorrow or the day after without you having any part in it. So you should be someone who really understands the problem, understand the other professions enough to understand the problem thoroughly, and then probably you can have so many solutions in front of you, and you just be able to understand each and every solution and know that which one should be the best. And that is pretty much, and you can probably say, look, this is a solution from the legal point of view, and this is how it should work. But it probably won't be the base without the other solution together. Or sometimes you should be able to just say that, look, I don't think there is any role of lawyer in this problem, because this is probably the worst way to solve it, and you just let it be, or let someone else do the job, right? So I think that's pretty much the framework that at least I sort of understand from the conversation.
Can I add to that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think that it is true that everyone has their own specialty and they bring something to the table. I just wanted to extend that another aspect in which we could focus on is really the collaboration. I am an engineer by training, but I can tell you because the research portfolio I have is very translational focus. So I care very much that there is impact within my lifetime based on the research or things that I design. I do need to work with people from the business end, from the medicine end. And really, I'm hoping and praying to make friends with people in the law end because it is important. I think that lawyers have a lot to say to help shape the technology. It is true that we can just develop something and then launch it and maybe get a patent out of it. Will it really survive the test of time and be able to integrate without creating what Dr. Sutapa has brought up as externalities in the future? I don't really know. I don't have that bird's eye view over how this technology could affect something else, or if I could be creating something bad in society. So having a team work of that is amongst different disciplines and especially lawyers and regulators is very precious. Now, one of the things that I think would be helpful, and I don't know if there are opportunities in Thailand, is in the UK there are panels and boards of different agencies like funding agencies for research, big grant bodies that they're always asking for people to apply to. So far, I'm in a couple of panels and I see a lot of doctors there in the panel for AI and methods, technology and stuff. And it would be, I think it's open to everyone. We've got some business folks too. If lawyers, I know you're very busy, but if you have time and are willing to come and join this, you'll be able to see the discussion and the issues on a very broad stroke, and your views and opinions actually will get translated into to be operationalized, at least for whatever that panel is doing. In my case, it's basically the dispensing of funds, money, in order to fund research that brings back impact for science, technology, and society. So it's about the team and lawyers helping to shape also how we develop technology and aspects we might overlook.
Okay, I think so many things to discuss, but I really want to hear from the floor as well. Shall we talk about things that you might want to talk about as well from the audience? Is there anything you want to raise to discuss? Yes, please.
As I know, currently we don't have the specific regulation for regulating AI in Thailand, or I think in other countries also. So if there's legal issues arising from the using of AI or relating to AI, how do we deal with this?
Okay, what is this? Well, there is actually one in the EU, right? The EU AI regulation, but they still need to add some sort of sub-regulations and guidelines for the full implementation. But I think a kickstart, but please feel free to jump in. Well, we do have some other laws anyway. I mean, if someone hurts another, you have tort law to deal with that. Some other dimensions still there. I mean, when we mentioned about data, if someone misuses someone's personal data, you have Personal Data Protection Act or GDPR in Europe. So yeah, there's still some other kind of vertical, if you like, vertical regulations and laws governing different areas of, actions. So yeah, it's still there. But of course, I think one of the things that we talk about today is kind of like, is there anything that you should specifically or blind the creators or whatever undertakings to be more or specifically careful about, like for example, when you develop technology and that technology is going to be used in the financial market, what kind of things that you need to do. For example, at least do you have to be transparent, and transparent on which front? What kind of things that you should disclose to your customers, right? So I think the whole reason why we talk about these concerns and opportunities, not the whole reason, but one of the main reasons is because when you understand it, you're gonna have more information to design. If you need to regulate it at all, but if you need to regulate it, to which extent? Is this transparency enough? And then you just pull some resources to educate clients or educate customers so they could protect themselves to a certain extent, and you don't put too much burden on the side of the businesses. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much my answer. But feel free to jump in if you like.
I would just add briefly, if you're interested in resources on Thailand's draft AI regulation, we've published lots of articles. So you can go to the Tilleke website, look for it there. You can also subscribe for client alerts and updates that we provide. And we regularly hold webinars with other firms. We've done comparative webinars on EU and Thailand. We've done China's AI law and Thailand in kind of comparative perspective. So I think there's a lot of resources out there that are available to you to look at. But as Kun Yok said, beyond the kind of specific AI regulation, when you're dealing with fintech, you're going to have Bank of Thailand regulation, I don't know, SEC or SET regulation, depending on what you're doing. So you've got a lot of industry-specific regulation that you need to look at in addition to the kind of general tort law and others.
Okay, so today's topic is very interesting, and it just like remind me of the activity that I was participated in at with Chula and Tilleke and Gibbins. It's about the how could AI can make an important legal fields, like how to facilitate it. And most of the group when we did it in Tilleke and Gibbins, just has an idea to create the website for the people who don't study law to consult whether they are guilty in such action or not. And in your perspective, would this kind of website would have significant impact on the firm in terms of the income form, like consulting?
If I understand your question, it means if there were kind of publicly available chatbot that answers initial questions about a legal issue, would it negatively affect our revenue, right? So again, I think we have to keep in mind the different elements of the legal industry that I mentioned. I think that for someone whose main job, a lawyer whose main job is kind of simple divorce law, there's a lot of standard structures in a basic divorce that could be responded to by a well-trained AI chatbot. So I do see some amount of risk on that type of law. I think once you get to more sophisticated corporate law issues, at least for now, it's not that risky. But I think the fundamental, every time that we think about one of those types of technologies, is how are you training that bot, right? And we talked about the haves and have-nots of technology. I mean, each law firm that's developing its own internal systems that support lawyers in responding to clients rather than externally facing is doing that based on their existing knowledge. So we're not all starting from the same place. If we're just implementing open AI, LLM and asking it questions, then everybody's just starting from the same place, so it's not helpful, I think. So the value that we can create with that kind of chatbot depends on what knowledge we've trained it with. And so I think part of what we bring into the equation then is each firm has the value of its existing knowledge. And the value of that knowledge is then going to be used in its interactions with clients. I think no reasonable firm would then make that public if it's a private practice law firm. But I think that's a great initiative for access to justice type organizations whose main goal is to democratize access to the law. And I think Thailand Lawyers Council has 80,000 members, 90,000 members, something like that, in a country of 70 million, right? We're still, compared to European countries, and don't talk about the US because it's crazy, we have a very low number of lawyers per person in Thailand. So I think there is a huge justice gap that can be filled with good technology. And making sure that technology is good is really important, and making sure it's good in Thai language is even another step of challenge that we'll get better and better with. So I think that has a really strong appeal for that kind of access to justice piece in the short term. In the longer term, it may have a big impact on how we operate, to the extent that clients, we're working with huge multi-billion-dollar clients. They could afford to invest a lot more in their legal AI than we can. So at some point, will we become less relevant? Maybe. And that's the fundamental crisis of the moment of the legal industry. Of course, you mentioned Richard Susskind earlier. His book is called The End of Lawyers. He wrote it in 2008. And lawyers are very much still here for now. So it tends to be a resilient industry. And I think, again, most people in the legal industry see that the most complex problems are always going to be there and always going to need really good legal advisors, really strong practitioners. But there's a lot below that that can be automated.
I'm speaking from the non-legal training perspective, but I would say that there's a lot of startup that actually focusing on a reg tech, regulation technology, and I think in that sense, what you're offering has been adopted and widely used in many aspects and many communities, but beyond that, so I think that's one area where you see one of the fastest growth in the tech space. I would say that it has been used quite a lot on sort of the helpline, connecting people in need or healthcare system where there might be some stigma in reaching out to doctor directly, and therefore, reaching out to doctor physically, and therefore, I think the technologies can help, lessen that stigma. What I want to say though is justice is the word of men. Men meaning human, and therefore I feel that machines do not know justice. Each society justice is different, so I doubt that lawyers will be out of jobs as long as human conflicts and human value keeps shifting, and therefore, sort of the paralegal may be reduced. The paralegal work may be reduced because of the automation, but I would say that the final solving of human conflicts and mitigating the value that's changing over time with society would still need another human to handle that, and I think that's sort of right squarely on lawyers' hand.
I think.
Yeah.
So what do you want to come in?
Just a little bit, yeah. So I totally
Please.
agree with Sutapa, and I guess it brings us back to the point that was said earlier that AI technology will replace certain tasks, but they can't replace the human, because a lot of these specialized fields that we're in, it took us years to study, and actually it interacts a lot with human complexity, in which the machine cannot have the global knowledge to deal with. So I'm in agreement. I guess the only thing to bring up then is back to the training as well. And this is where the bifurcation will happen in every single field. It is the people who are going to succeed. So AI is not going to replace the people. The people who are going to succeed are the people who are going to be able to embrace AI to use it so that it's fit for purpose and safe for use. I think those are the two key words: fit for purpose, safe for use. So ChatGPT is not really a good thing for client-facing anything that is decision-making. That's one thing. So in medicine, we can't rely on that to build a conversational AI machine in order to advise on diagnosis or treatment pathways, for example.
No, thank you very much. I sort of you sort of remind me that whenever I listen to a lot of interviews with people in the field of AI, and they usually a classic example that they use when they want to talk about the benefit of AI to the humanity is usually medicine and health science, right? Like this sort of AlphaFold thing, which is I think very exciting. Come back to this. I think it's quite interesting because, look, in economics, there's this kind of phenomenon which is classic. It's called a labor polarization, which it happens every single once of the technological wave occurred, not just AI, any technology. It's sort of, the technology would come in and sort of push people to two extremes, right? On one hand, there's a very low skill labor. You're going to survive because it's not worth it to substitute you by the machine. And on the other hand, is your skill is high to the level that the machine can't substitute you. I still believe it's true to a certain extent. I mean, AI is not an exception to that technology anyway, at least at a moment in time. So basically, and you are actually right in a very good moment because you are still learning to be this kind of profession, knowing that it's coming and it will be better. So I think one of the very important questions is to ask yourself, like, how would you position yourself? Because I still believe that the world still rewards specialty, and specialization sort of concurs at least in this regime of economy. So yeah, just in a very good position to position yourself. Yeah. Yes, please.
I just have a little question. So I just wonder, like, how might the AI affect the trust of people when it go to the court or something like that? Because sometimes it's still not legit information from the AI. So how is it could affect the society trust? Yeah.
And can I because I listened to Professor Harari on the other day, and he talked about AI in finance, and he claimed that the fundamental of the financial world is trust. So you may be the very good one to start, please.
Well, I think trust is important in medicine as well, but let's say finance. Especially when we use their data, right? I think, let me put it this way. I think trust comes from two major aspects. One is you know what is behind the scene, right? And that's build trust. For example, some people do not trust machine because they do not understand how it works. So let's just shut off and not use it. And that's more fear than the mistrust. It's more, well, because I don't know who they are, let's not deal with it. So I think that can be solved easily by providing basic knowledge of how things works. What's the nuts and bolts? They don't need to know the technical details, but they at least understand how the input is collected, how it's stored, how it's used, how it's shared, or how the machine is using that information to establish pattern and predict outcome. Then there's another mistrust of they do not believe the people behind the machine operation. And I think that's a different story. For example, people don't believe in the past. People don't believe in Big Brother because they collect too much information. They might use that against you. people are afraid that bad players are going to collect all this information and use it against the users and all that. And that needs to be regulated separately from the technology. So would that answer your question on trust? Okay.
From my perspective, I think I understand what you mean, that if people are relying on generative AI, let's say a lawyer, we have the famous New York lawyer, this so poor guy who gets brought up all the time. He made a court submission based on ChatGPT, cases were all hallucinations, and he gets called out, right? So does that erode trust in the overall justice system? I think, let's think of non-generative AI world, right? In that case, even pre-electronic research, before we had LexisNexis and Westlaw and other tools, the trust is based on you have a well-trained lawyer who can understand the law effectively, look up case law in a physical book. They certainly had a lot of risk of overlooking something or getting something wrong at that time. Yet the trust was there because the people were operating to the best of their capability given the technological constraints that they had at the time, right? They were doing their best based on available knowledge. So I think certainly if it becomes pervasive that generative AI is full of inaccuracy and hallucination and other things, it would undermine trust. But I think if we're seeing it moving very fast in the other direction, where we're seeing a lot of improvements in accuracy, and I think it has the potential to really reinforce trust, because the plaintiff is making submissions and relying on vast corpus of data that they would not have otherwise have the opportunity to rely on, global case law and other things. So does the defendant, and so does the court. If the technology is available equally, which it may not well be, which is one of the factors we keep coming back to the extent that the technology is broadly available equally, then everyone has access to great data, and actually it should reinforce trust rather than undermining it. But where it's unequal and different parties have different levels of resources, that just kind of reinforces the same justice gap that has always existed between those who have a lot of resources and those who don't.
Dr. Waty, I'm not sure whether you want to add something to this, but just to reflect on what Andrew just mentioned, I think trust, when you mentioned, it's about trust in society as a whole. Is that correct?
I think it's just both like trust in society and then trust in like judgment. Yeah, when you go to the court or something.
Because I feel that the use of AI to help with decision making will improve the trust with accuracy, and I think it's moving in that direction. I'm pretty confident of it. But on the other side, it's more about, it's not so much about generative AI, but generative AI help exacerbate the contents in the digital space that make people trust those information less, whether it's true or not true, and the ability to verify those facts has become blurred. And I think it leads us to society of anarchy, meaning that you don't believe in anything that you hear or trust. And that's very, very different than a political party using misinformation to attack another. Because I think population may be able to know that this is the tools that they use, but the fact that they trust information less and less, it's a new rhyme that I think we may be entering in near future. And I think that state of anarchy is a likely possibility. So that's why all the industries and everyone involved in the society right now are looking into that to solve this problem of deep fake, of regulating the contents in the space, in the digital space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess from my point of view, in terms of development and deployment, I think what would be really useful is if we take even a step back from your topic of trust, right? What were the source of mistrust, which Dr. Sutapa has mentioned? It could be the machine itself and the understanding of it, and then secondly, the person's use of it. What if we took a step even further back in the back end to think about then what are the source of those mistrusts, and how can regulation and law maybe come in to nudge people in the right direction to do the right thing, and what is the baseline standard that is required for that? Because that's something which, for me as a technologist, I'm aware of all these misgivings of the technology, but I don't really know how much is enough so that there is a standardized level, which we call regulations and guidelines, so that it's applicable across and comparable across the board within society. And I look forward to something like that, actually. Now, if we had something like that, I think trust will come. Because I frankly don't know if I go into a CT scan machine, I don't know how it works. I really don't. But I have trust in the process of the regulation, the law, and the experts who are using it. So that brings back the whole point that Andrew has been harping again and again, which I'm totally on board, which is the human in the loop and the expert who is manning the machine behind. I think also that it is important to focus on two things. If you're looking, I think, at least for me, I guess I'm just talking from the perspective of someone developing stuff, but in terms of guidelines, I'd like to see the limit or the baseline or regulation law, some kind of advice that can be given so that we can regulate or monitor, let's just say monitor and test out not just the accuracy, but the robustness and reliability of the AI system across time. That's what I think is missing. Accuracy is basically you have a test pool data that's fixed, and then you predict on that task on the test pool, and you count how many do you get correct versus wrong, and that gives you the percentage accuracy. But for me, robustness is when you're able to take it from one data source to another, so data from one hospital to another, to another, to another. That robustness and reliability and what is required underneath before you approve something to be of use so that people would trust it, I think that is important. Yeah, I think that's it for me.
Very interesting. I mean, probably, I mean, all the points, I think one thing I want to sort of point out is you have to distinguish between trust and faith as well. It's kind of like, when you talk about trust, for me, I sort of second what Pico said. It's pretty much just a asymmetric information. You just don't know what's going on the other side. And there are so many ways to solve it, right? I mean, and that's pretty much, a lot of them has to do with our jobs as a lawyer as well. Like, for example, you don't know how exactly it works, these kind of products. For example, I just have a little kid, and I just don't know if these things are actually safe for my kid. But I just trust it because I know that the system of product liability is there. I know that these kind of like authorities who know better than me have investigated it. I know that these system knows something, and I sort of believe, or probably it has been used for thousands or millions of people and seems to be fine, so I trust it. Yeah. So I think that will come to court as well, and that is why I mentioned about faith as well, because court not just use this kind of like asymmetric information to build trust, but a court has this sort of emotional side of it, this sort of sacred, image of it as well, to make that you sort of believe as given as well, and that is how it is built. And that is why, I mean, again, I refer back to him, Richard Susskind. He wrote in another book, which is about court in particular, and that is, I mean, when you deliver any kind of services or product, he started out with saying like, court is probably not just a place, but it's probably just a service. But if you try to have a place with sort of add-on technologies, people will question that. But probably you have to reimagine the way that you're going to craft out this kind of service. And probably people would think about these two as two different species and would be okay with the other. And he said later on that the technology that you deliver is not just about a function that you deliver, but it's about emotional aspect of it as well, whether people really is in peace with using it or not. So yeah, I think it will boil down to how you actually design the integration of technology to serve the function of court, but not to be a court. It's, I mean, as of the place itself. Yeah.
I think this is less of a question and more of an observation that I made. So as Dr. Sutapa has mentioned that most laws regulate the use of use of electronics, not like regulates like the electricity itself. But then again, with the development of AI and it's like this new technology, and with the input from Dr. Waty that we should really be regulating the accuracy of AI and like how AI actually works. I think my question is this shift of how laws should be, make. How do you think that would like impact both law practitioners and like the society itself that is normally familiar with like the old type of like regulations on like the use of it?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase that question one more time for me?
I'm so sorry. I think.
No, there's a lot to unpack, and I just wanted to make sure that we're answering your question. It's just, if you could help me a little bit, I'd really appreciate it.
I'm so sorry, it's just that I think Dr. Sutapa has mentioned that like law is about regulating the use of something and not the thing itself, the technology itself. But with AI, I really do believe that regulating the accuracy, having regulators going into like the development process and making sure that technology is really working is something that is important. And how does this shift in like law and like regulations would like impact both law practitioners or like the society itself that is usually like used to laws that regulates the use of technology?
I would. Okay, thank you. Waty, you want to go first on this? Okay, let me try to give some example whether I answer your question. I would say that I think generative AI or artificial intelligence in general has replaced decision-making process in some way. And the law has always been about addressing the decision maker. And therefore, the example of autonomous car, for example, if the driver does not have or does not have control or did intervene in the event of crash, who should be blamed for that, right? And the law should say, and I think law in different countries, different in jurisdictions decide differently, but I would think that would it be for the engineer, would it be for the car company, or should it be for the driver who decided not to intervene, for example? And I think these guidelines needs to be quite clear upfront, and that's what I mean by you regulate the application rather than development of artificial intelligence. Accuracy definitely should not be regulated, but I think the use of inaccurate technology for an application that requires accuracy and in some way reflect justice or fairness is important to be regulated. So I hope my answer is addressing your question.
I personally have no answer to your question because I think it's a really hard question, and I think it's probably up to really smart academics to be thinking about that much more than those of us who are in the world. But I would say I do think it's kind of part of a trend. I mean, we see a lot of new regulation on AI. We see all kinds of cyber security based regulation that really are cross-industry and, trying to tackle a technology problem and implementation. And I think both of those, one thing that they have in common is being tied into much broader political and societal issues. And I think across Southeast Asia, we do see some very, I feel like I have to be careful what I say, we're in a public forum. Some very specific applications of laws like that that may be more around control of democracy and social movements and other things because of how technology can interplay with those things. So it's just such a complex set of issues that it's really hard to answer. But I think it's certainly something that's going to play out with this type of legislation, and I think we need to look out for more legislation and more regulation that is like that in the future.
I guess I'll add a couple of points to that in terms of law, regulation, guidelines. Definitely agree with both panelists. From my perspective on the back end and development, I still think we do need that. And in terms of regulating accuracy, I guess you can't regulate accuracy or robustness for that matter, but having some minimum guidelines for safety of use is important. The analogy Dr. Sutapa brought up in terms of electricity is an excellent one. I actually wrote it down because I thought it was great. But just to clarify slightly, I think where the technology regulation should come in, it's more not the electricity, which is akin to the information that the AI can extract out. That's what it's akin to. What should be regulated, it is still, I guess, the machinery at the back end. So in the electricity, it's all the mechanics for the dam building and everything and relaying of electricity and the sockets that deliver, things to your appliances so that it's safe for use. So for me, that is important. And it's important because not all technologies are created equal for a particular task. And because of that, there needs to be some guideline, I think, best practice to help guide us to weed out things that are redundant and not so fit for purpose against those that are a winner in society for delivering the needs of the consumer. So, but you see, that is where no one has an answer again. Nobody knows how to do this regulation because with AI, it is a different beast as to most things we are looking at in terms of technology. It is inherently something that is learning from its environment, but it's got its limitations. It's dynamically changing over time. How do we govern that? How do we approve the minimum level that it needs to perform in order to be able to blossom and dynamically develop? So that's what I think. There are no answers, and that's why you hear the new young generation coming up with great ideas, saving the world. Yay!
Dr. Sutapa, you mentioned that when building Money Thunder, a lot of machines and AI were used. So if it's not too confidential, have you ever faced any legal issues relating to AI? And if so, how do you overcome it or solve it? Thank you.
No, the answer is no. But I think there are some difficulties that we need to work around to make sure that it's compliant. And it may related to regulation, or some may just related to guideline of we want to offer the same experience, for example. For illustration, when we develop Money Thunder, we realized that the group of customer needs a specific type of offering. For example, they may not have a long history of credit record from the formal lender because they basically just borrow from loan sharks or pawn shops as a reliable source of funding. And therefore, we cannot rely heavily on the NCB, the National Credit Bureau information to use for our to use as an input for the risk model. Then we want to make sure that whatever information that we ask from them is properly consented. Then it comes down to some people are more literate about giving consent on information than others. We want to make sure that the language that we use to ask for consent is not legalese, no offense to lawyers, and it's clear on what we're collecting, how long we're collecting them, who are we sharing, what it is used for. So those things, obviously we do want to comply with the regulation, but also to build trust. So even if it's not required for us to make sure that the language is simple and easy for people to understand, we want to do it on our own to make sure that we build trust.
So I was wondering if Thailand is to implement an AI safety regulations. At what level should AI safety regulations first operate? Like in, for example, like in engineering level, the company, or like the system?
AI safety regulation?
So who's going to be the undertakings?
Good question for Ajahn Yok.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, this is actually a really good point. Look, there's so many factors, right? You guys did law and economic course with me, and you remember one of the thing is who bear the lowest cost, right? Well, that's one thing. Another thing is you as a regulator, what is your enforcing capacity, right? If you impose on like at the very R&D level, for example, and most companies that you are trying to regulate are just elsewhere. The question is, do you think you can actually enforce anything, right? So I think there's so many factors to take into account, let alone these things. You have to think about this kind of like, well, if you're going to regulate, if you regulate too early, like you've imposed so much cost early on, that probably would hinder innovation as well. So there's so many dimensions that you need to really strike a balance there, right? And what kind of regulation are we talking about here? Are we talking about that you have to disclose everything? Well, again, trade secret and confidentiality of the information. So yeah, I mean, these are sort of like parameters that we need to be able to adjust. But probably the most important thing that we need to answer before we do all of these is, what are the objectives? What do you want to achieve there, right? You want to make sure that tech is safe for everyone no matter what. Okay, you do this way. You want to make sure that innovation is still there, investment will still come, and reasonably safe for users. You probably do it the other way. So it's not an instant answer, easy or simple answer to that, but I think that's pretty much what I would put.
Yeah. My question is, how should the intellectual property laws evolve to like accommodate AI-generated work and innovations such as like AI music or machine-generated art?
Well, if I may, because I mean, we're going to have a session on IP for another 3 hours. So let's just leave this question to that. Apologies for that, but this is a very important question, of course, unless that any of you wanna address it. But it's super important, IP and AI, yeah, on many fronts. All right, it's been 3 hours in the blink of an eye. I think I've learned a lot, and I know that this topic is not something that we can discuss within this short interval. But I think, I personally learn a lot, and I look into your eyes, and I know that you learn a lot as well. So I think probably everything is a very good conclusion for itself. I won't spend time to devalue what we have been discussing by mere conclusion that I may have. So yeah, thank you very much. I think we learned a lot, and it's truly my honor to have three of you here with me. Dr. Waty, I look forward to welcome you soon, and I look forward to meet you with my wife when you visit Thailand. So look forward to that. Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Sutapa, Andrew, and Dr. Waty. Thank you very much for your wisdom and experience sharing. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you.